Hello, and welcome to the presentation on Reimagining Kentucky's Assessment and Accountability Programs. I'm Jennifer Stafford, the Director in the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support with the Kentucky Department of Education. Thank you for your interest and engagement in imagining what the future of education could be in Kentucky. I want to encourage you, as we review the information shared today, to think about not only what is being presented, but also what other ideas you have. Nothing in these prototypes are carved in stone. It is a starting point for discussion on how we make our assessment and accountability systems more meaningful and useful for all of our learners. Now, there will be some choice points or decision making within the prototypes. So don't look at the prototypes as I like this one over that one, or number one over number two, but think of them of the key points that you like, as well as other ideas that you may have, because they can be interchanged. Now, the journey to get to this point has been long and spanned several years. From the Kentucky Education Feedback Survey that was launched in 2020, to the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education in 2021, receiving a $3 million competitive grant for state assessments that funded the Kentucky United We Learn Council, and the innovative work that is happening within our local labs of learning. Each of these played really important parts and crucial roles in bringing us to where we are today. Inspired by the Kentucky United We Learn report, a vision for education emerged, one in which communities actively collaborate with schools, developing deep partnerships and embracing a collective responsibility for improvement. The United We Learn members are exploring ways to achieve the future of education by advancing three connected ideas: vibrant learning experiences for every student, encouraging innovation, and especially in assessments and in accountability, and collaborating closely with our communities. The overarching goal is to build a prosperous Kentucky by launching an accountability system that includes different assessments that is meaningful and useful to all of our learners. One that portrays a more complete picture of every student, values collaboration among civic leaders, school leaders, and local school boards in providing relevant and personal learning opportunities to each young person in their community. The Kentucky Department of Education has brought together a diverse set of stakeholders working and learning together in an inclusive and empathetic way. There are around 55 members who make up the Kentucky United We Learn Council. They're led by Penny Christian, who's the chair, Jim Flynn, who's the vice chair, and Karen Dodd, who's the Kentucky Department of Education lead. The council is organized into three committees, which align with the principles outlined in the United We Learn report, along with 4 work groups that concentrate on specific topics. I have the opportunity to facilitate the Accelerated Innovation Committee, and I've also had the opportunity to work with the Systems of Systems as well as the Menu of Options work group. They provided the inspiration and guidance for these prototypes. Which leads us to the Kentucky United We Learn Council's journey toward launching a new accountability system. We are currently in the process of developing the prototypes. You can see at the bottom left-hand side of the slide the concentric circles. This depicts where we are currently in the journey toward our moonshot. The prototype development is an iterative process. It involves continuous feedback, review, and refinement. So there's going to be multiple versions of this prototype document. The first version of the document was based on the guidance provided by the Menu of Options workgroup, was developed for their review. As it turned out, they wanted pretty significant changes to that first version. For example, the first version had 4 prototypes, and based on their feedback, version 2 was updated, edited, and now only has 2 prototypes. So you can see that it is very much a work in progress. The version 2.0 is being shared more broadly for input and feedback so that a broader audience can provide guidance. The plan is to collect feedback and update the prototypes based on the feedback from multiple groups. It's an iterative process of continuously providing opportunity for review and reflection, and each updated version will be influenced by input and feedback received across multiple groups. So again, your input and feedback are critical in this process. Along this process, legislators are also going to be engaged or actively informed about the progress. In the fall, we will move to a study phase, where stakeholders will continue to review and refine the prototypes. During the study phase, we will engage with schools and districts to develop more details. This collaborative journey with the Kentucky United We Learn Council will advance alongside the Kentucky Department of Education, the Kentucky Board of Education. Our ultimate goal is to establish an approved, reimagined accountability system. The Accelerating Innovation Committee started in November of 2022 with the kickoff of the Kentucky United We Learn initiative. During that first year, members explored innovative assessment and accountability systems, both inside and outside of Kentucky. They researched and found the values that they held, and they articulated design principles for future assessment programs and accountability innovations for the state, and began to prototype from multiple angles. In November of 2023, Kentucky United We Learn Council convening took a shift away from the standing committees into work groups. The System of Systems work group developed the idea around a menu of options that you're going to see in the prototypes. In April of 2024, during the spring convening, 16 members of the United We Learn Council joined the Menu of Options work group to help design a new assessment as well as an accountability system. The Council is taking a structured approach to design Kentucky's educational system, moving from broad goals to specific implementation details. System aspirations that were defined in the United We Learn report with those big overarching goals, to the design principles where key principles were identified that guide our system of design. We are currently in the essential features phase where those essential features are being identified, and these features should directly align to those established design principles. As an example, we may be incorporating local demonstrations of learning to advance student engagement. In the next phase, the operational components will be identified. We will delve into practical implementation aspects. This includes how the system interacts with existing structures and processes. Basically, the graphic emphasizes a thoughtful progression from high-level goals to actionable steps. The great thing about this work is that we're working on policy and practice at the same time, trying to improve our policy to match the great work that is happening in our local districts. These principles serve as guideposts. For example, designing to prioritize student experiences and outcomes reflect an important principle and functions as a reference for ongoing verification and checks to ensure that our approach aligns with our aspirations. Let's turn now to the prototypes. They are meant to illustrate different and unique approaches for future assessments and accountability. And again, these are not definitive sets, and you may choose between some essential features in the first one, or you may like some of the features in the second one and would like to combine those, or suggest others. We're trying to provide some scenarios to inform the conversation, something that serves as a starting point. They are a way to analyze different approaches to determine what we like and what we don't like. So you may want to offer another approach. Again, each prototype is meant to illustrate a kind of a unique approach at the same time that they are meant to be malleable. In each prototype section, there are essential features of that prototype, what the implications are for assessment, for reporting, for accountability systems, and including school report and improvement activities, as well as policy and political considerations. So let's look at Prototype 1. The strategy for Prototype 1 was to build an accreditation-style system into state accountability and to incorporate transparency and more flexibility of evidence that is being brought and included into our state accountability system. Schools and districts would engage in gathering evidence of school quality relative to each of the domains to share with the local Board of Education and an external evaluator for review and feedback. Schools would receive ratings on rubrics relative to each domain of school quality. An external evaluator, the local Board of Education and district and school leaders would work collaboratively to set goals based on the evidence. They would collectively create school improvement strategies, and they would have input and decision-making on what evidence they would collect and provide to demonstrate the school quality. Now, evidence of school quality would be reported as it becomes available, and schools could resubmit their evidence to the external evaluator for formal evaluations at regular intervals. The suggestion is to submit evidence at least once every 3 years. While data is updated in real time on a data display for all stakeholders within the community to reflect upon. Schools can engage the community conversations about how collectively they can support their schools and provide better opportunities for the students over time. Kentucky would still need to meet federal requirements, but this prototype reduces accountability requirements to the bare minimum that it was required by federal law, which means only 3 levels of school ratings for federal accountability. This could be identified as meets requirements. We have to also identify targeted support and improvement, as well as additional targeted support and improvement schools and the comprehensive support and improvement schools. And in this prototype, the state's color rating would be eliminated. Another key choice point is whether to continue the change component that is in our current state and federal accountability systems, or to incorporate individual student growth. Now, let's remind ourselves, the change component is the difference on our state indicators between the prior year performance and the current year performance on those state indicators. The difference is, with individual student growth, it's the student performance in reading and math and the difference in the student's performance from one year to the next. So whereas the change component is about school differences in performance, the individual student growth is about student differences from one year to the next. So far, we've been discussing in the prototypes the accountability system. And as a reminder, accountability is a framework in which schools are held accountable, and it's the data that is collected and how that data is then interpreted and used to make decisions about school interventions, supports, and federal accountability. Our current accountability system in Kentucky has a set of indicators that schools are evaluated on, and then those are combined into our color rating currently. Now, let's turn our attention and look at assessment options for just a moment. Assessments are included in the accountability system. So the assessment is the statewide standardized assessment system aligned to the Kentucky academic standards in math, reading, writing, science, and social studies. And there are different options in how we could structure those assessments within the accountability system. Within the prototypes, there are currently 3 assessment options. The first option, option 1.2a, replaces our current single summative assessment in reading and math with a through-year model that captures student learning in reading and math. Now, this information would be available immediately to our schools and districts and teachers so that they could provide supports in a formative manner to our students. The through-year assessments could be adaptive in that the items adjust to identify where students are on the scale and include items that are above or below grade level. With this approach, it would increase the test administrations from the state, but it would also lead to an increase in instructionally relevant information that could be provided in a more timely manner. However, the through-year model is intended to replace the locally adapted interim assessments and ideally reducing the local assessment cost and testing times. In this option, the state assessment in science, social studies, and writing would remain the same. The next option, 1.2b, would be a system in which we would need some federal flexibility or waivers for. This one, the state would pilot a new system of assessment that adopts a competency-based approach. It would include authentic demonstrations of knowledge and skills, and the assessment system in reading, math, and science would include a combination of short-form standard assessments and these authentic performance tests. The authentic performance assessment would measure both the academic standards and student skills relative to the competencies in the local district's portrait of a learner. Student work on the performance assessment would be available immediately for educators to score and inform instructional next steps. The innovative system, again, would be piloted and need to be refined in a subset of districts before scaling statewide. Option 1.2c, in this option, the state would reduce the number of assessment used in our state to only those that meet the federal requirements. So that would be reading, math, and science, while moving the social studies and writing to local assessments for instructional purposes. The state assessments would then meet the federal requirements that could be just a single summative measure or could include the through-course approach as we saw in 1.2a. The reductions in the state assessment system create room for local assessment innovations like those authentic demonstrations of learning across the broader set of content areas. For example, social studies, arts, and humanities, and so forth, and may include student capstone projects, performance assessment, and the student learning level defenses. These local demonstrations of learning would be valued alongside the state assessment results, as we saw in the domains of that school quality framework, and would be reported publicly. Let's look now at Prototype 2. The strategy for Prototype 2 was to build into the accountability a vibrant learning experience component. Building on the vibrant learning experiences could take a couple of different approaches and provides another choice point. The first option, 2.1a, would incorporate more local evidence of vibrancy within the federal accountability framework. Because the requirements and regulations put into federal accountability, the indicator itself is a bit more constrained. This would be a menu of options type indicator used to evaluate the school quality within the federal school accountability system. It would be the percentage of students engaged in one or more of those vibrant learning experiences our districts are offering. These options came out of the System of Systems work group that include the student capstones and other locally proposed federally approved options. Schools could develop some of their own that could possibly be submitted for federal approval. This is a student level indicator within the federal accountability, so no changes then to the state accountability would be then envisioned. The other option, 2.1b, is focused on state accountability by incorporating vibrant learning experiences domain and testing in the state accountability space. This is really adapting a process-based school level indicator of vibrant learning experiences into the state accountability system. It would include rubrics, it would be rubric based, and schools would be evaluated based on the quality of evidence that they are able to create and submit towards that rubric. Again, there would be a lot of flexibility on how schools gather and submit evidence, but the rubrics would remain the same. We're envisioning here possibly a 5-point rubric evaluating the strength of the evidence provided relative to the vibrancy of those learning experiences. And if a school is scoring a 4 or 5, one of those higher levels of that rubric, then perhaps that's reflected in their school rating so that the school is able to move up a color. For example, if a school had one of those higher ratings on those vibrant learning experiences, they would possibly move from, say, a yellow to a green, or if they were green, maybe a green to a blue. This isn't rewriting or revamping the entire state system, but rather valuing those vibrant learning experiences in that state accountability system. So that we all have a common definition of vibrant learning experiences, the Kentucky United We Learn Council has adopted a definition of vibrant learning, where students in collaborations with their families, communities, they engage in vibrant learning that celebrates their cultural wealth and culminates in personalized applications of knowledge and skills. Now, depending on the choices and decisions that are made during those choice points within the prototypes, other considerations will need to be discussed as we move forward along this process. The first is reporting. So information from the reimagined state assessment and accountability systems will serve as the primary means of communicating about school quality. We'll also need to look at those domains of school quality and determine if those are the right measures of school quality. Another consideration is school support and improvement efforts. If changes are made and decisions are made to change the federal accountability system, then information from those changes will be used to identify our schools for targeted support and improvement, additional targeted support, and comprehensive support and improvement. Also, any changes that are made, when there are legislative changes, it impacts our resources, both physical impacts as well as human. So changes within the prototype, such as that accreditation, collection of evidence, additional reporting, will impact our teachers, our administrators, our local communities, and could have impact and implications on cost both at the school, district, and state level. So as we move forward with these prototypes and the decisions about those, we have to keep in mind how those ongoing discussions and the advocacy of how those impact our human and physical resources. Other policy considerations from the prototypes, there are possible implications for federal and our state, both statutes and regulations. So if there are changes to the federal accountability system, the Department of Education would need to seek approval from the U.S. Department of Education on any changes to that federal system through our ESSA state plan. We would also need to submit, if there are changes to the assessment, we'll need to submit for approval and feedback through the peer review process. So documentation and approvals would have to go through that negotiation with the U.S. Department of Education from the department. Now, if it impacts our state policies, then we would have to work with the General Assembly. State statutory changes would be needed, regulatory changes would be needed from the Kentucky Board of Education, and then the Department of Education here in Kentucky would need to revise our policy to align with any of those changes. So your feedback is crucial. It's very critical that you complete the survey that is going to be shared with you, because we're going to take your feedback to the Kentucky United We Learn Council, who meets at the end of July. This process is going to be an iterative process that we continuously update the versions of the prototype document. It's a process of review, reflection, and continuously updating based on the input and feedback that we're receiving from multiple groups. We're going to take then, after we get the feedback from multiple groups, and we had the July 29th Kentucky United We Learn convening, we're going to take another version, the updated version, based on all of that feedback to the Kentucky Board of Education. The plan is to get their feedback at their retreat in August. So that's a really quick timeline and a really quick turnaround. So it's really important that you complete the survey so that we can have your input and feedback on these prototypes. We're excited to dig into and have the opportunity to receive your feedback. Again, I want to encourage you to complete that survey and dig into that prototype document, version 2.0. Look for updated versions as we move along this journey together. Thank you for your interest and engagement in imagining what the future of education could be in Kentucky.